sharing session, which is going to be definitely an interesting one, because when we talk about computers and in particular technology, what we usually forget is the humanity at the end of it. After all, what we are trying to do is solve human problems. Ultimately, we are here today to discuss the human touch in online mediation. And that is a fantastic topic because, after all, it is the conflict between man that we are here to dispose of. Now, joining us today is an eminent scholar who is a professor of negotiation and conflict resolution in the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies at the Crichton University Graduate School. Noam, as I was just ribbing him, has been all around the world. And judging by his absolutely surfer looks at the moment, I would say that he's completely relaxed and is an authority. Only authorities wear this look. He's also taught at many universities around the world at the moment, and he's also practiced as an attorney. That is unique and rare because it's very rare that we find people who understand the practice, people who also understand the jurisprudence behind the practice, which is key to developing new and interesting solutions to what we do. After all, we're in a challenging time. He has educated judges and business people and spearheaded curriculum development around the world. So the only thing I would add that he's also quite a distinguished author. Looking at his bibliography, I was quite shocked, and I must then refer to him as someone with encyclopedic knowledge about the development of ODR. So without further ado, please welcome Noam Ebner. Noah, take it away.
Thank you so much, Tunde. And I will say, first of all, that I've been practicing recently the very hard to master skill of allowing people to say nice things about me without me correcting them and telling them the truth. So I'm just going to nod and say thank you for your gracious and kind words and leave it at that. Deep breath, and we'll proceed. I'm so happy to be here. In the nature of our times, I will take a short break in the middle of saying how happy I am to be there and ask if it's possible. I still am unable to share my screen. While I am ultimately able and happy to speak without a PowerPoint, I do want you to know that I went through the effort of preparing one for this talk and for you, so it would be great if we could use it. If it turns out that there's a technical issue, just jump on and let me know. I'm so happy to be here. I was just discussing with Tunde before how he commented how I had worked and taught around the world, and I mentioned that while my travels have taken me to Africa, rather to bracket Africa at the tips of Egypt and Cape Town, basically, it is I've never worked in anywhere in Africa, and that's something that I really hope I'll be able to rectify once we're able to start moving around the world again. On the other hand, here I am. And I'm very much here, but our notions of where here is have shifted so fundamentally. And again, as Tunde was just saying, how, he's never worked across so many jurisdictions. If I might share, Tunde, in a single day, you can be in a dozen different jurisdictions and in a dozen different time zones. So where are we anyway? our notions of geography have shifted. Our notions of time have also shifted. It's morning for me. It's afternoon, evening for you.
Nobody's feeling it. Nobody said anything.
So, essentially, we're here to discuss a shift from our old world into our new world. And I'm not going to, I think, waste our time with sort of prophesizing what the new world will be, because who knows? The moment anybody says something, it changes. And as a good friend Colin Rule once said, the important thing about making predictions about technology is that you always look silly after a couple of years. So let's not go there, but instead, as Tunda said, let's look at the humans. The humans at the heart of the mediation process. I won't say they remain a constant, because I actually have a whole notion of how humans are changing in this period and in the preceding technological era. That's not exactly what we're going to talk about today. But I am going to remind us that no matter what the COVID era has done to us, it has brought us online, it has locked us in homes, it has also changed the way we fundamentally do things. At the heart, everything we do online, we are still humanly doing online. And that is at the heart of today's talk. And now that I can successfully share my screen, or at least, can I have a thumbs up if that actually works? Can you see that screen? Okay, great, thank you. We're going to talk about the human and the human touch that is at the heart of online mediation. Online mediation being the mode of practice that so many of us have practiced in over the past couple of years, some of us more. And before jumping into it, I'll just say a couple of things. The first is that I've set a clock to go off 40 minutes from now. I could talk about this topic alone and with you for hours and hours and hours. At the end of 40 minutes, no matter where I am, I'm going to stop and say, over to you. This could be in the middle of a sentence. The second thing is that this is a community. I'm the person walking into this community. I'm the new kid on the block. If you want to, communities have conversations rather than lectures. If anyone would like to jump in with a comment, with a question, with a suggestion along the way, please, please, please do. And even if I don't see you on screen, because I'll have a limited view of my screen, if someone else sees someone who seems to want to speak, feel free to jump on them and tell them and remind them that it's fine. To jump into things, I'll say that while I have been working in the field of online dispute resolution for about 15 years now, I didn't get into it because of an interest in computers or an interest in programming. I'm not a techie. What interested me instead, as far back as 2002, 2003, when sort of the first chat and messaging systems started to become popular after email had debuted, is I got interested in how people communicate over distances and what this newfound ability to communicate means for their relationships and for their communication. So I'm in this for the human side. Along the way, there's been a lot of technology along the way, of course, but at the heart of things, my key interest or my core interest is in us. What is technology doing to us, and how do we use technology rather than technology itself? So let's just jump right into that topic in the context of mediation and present the briefest of all histories of online mediation, or as my friend Nikki Borowski from New York City, she's from GEMS, calls it the 5 stages of virtual ADR, where you go through, much like the 5 stages of grief. Many people sort of went through 5 stages of denial, anger, initial training, a first session of actually doing it, and then some degree of acceptance. And I imagine that those of you who have been practicing over the past couple of years, whether you've completely shifted your practice online or partially or occasionally, depending on the flare-ups in your region, you've all been through some variation of these 5 stages. And the interesting thing is my bird's eye view allows me to suggest that writ large, looking globally, the first stage of denial took the world around 25 years. And then the second, at least stages 2, 3, and 4, and largely 5, all took place over the course of 2 to 4 weeks, somewhere between the end of February and the end of March, depending where you are in the world in 2020. And there are, and you might have gone through that process yourself back then, or maybe you joined in a little later. But that's basically how the world shifted. I noticed, by the way, that there are several people, there are several people in the waiting room. I know that one of you will probably want to manage the waiting room, but I do get this notice, so I'm mentioning it. What the future holds, has everybody accepted it? Will people actually prefer it? Who knows? Let's not go there today. And instead, what we're going to do is we're going to explain why there was this 25 years of largely denial. Why did this denial occur, and what can, moving past this denial and rejection of online mediation, what can it teach us? How can we learn? How can we learn about what it means to be human in mediation from this from these stages of rejection and acceptance? So when speaking to people, because again, as I've been in the field for many years, I've had a lot of conversations with people asking them, why are you resisting this? Why do you object to conducting mediation processes online or negotiation processes online? And in one variation or another, they almost to a person, they cited the human touch, that there's something missing online, and that something is of the essence, and that essence is the human touch. And as I'll say, exactly what they meant by that varied, of course, but it is amazing. If I had $1 for every time someone told me the human touch, I would have retired a happy and wealthy man by now. So of course, over time, I grew fascinated by what is that human touch. Another part of me also suspected that there was more happening beneath the surface, that it was easy to point to some missing human touch because other things were going on. One reason that I had the suspicion was because people were telling me the same human touch resistance reason when I had discussions with them about online teaching. I've lived in different places over the world. I'm originally from the United States. I lived in Israel for many years. I moved around the globe, as Tunde has introduced me, and I've taught from different places, in different places. I've been working at Creighton University for nearly 13, 14 years now, wholly online. So I've been teaching online for a long, long time before it got popular. Or unpopular recently. And of course, many teachers would also tell me, you can't do that. It doesn't work. You can't connect. There's no human touch. So hearing that recurring chorus of the human touch and its lack always brought me to wonder what was really going on. And one thing that I suspect was going on is, Douglas Adams phrased it in his own unique and funny way, but really the notion is that there's a certain human resistance to change that is going on, and it is perfectly natural, and we've all experienced it in our lives. We've resisted change processes. Some of it has to do with technological change, some of it might have to do with other sort of change, but speaking broadly, while many humans like to say that, you know, we're flexible, we like to flow, and we're open to change, and we even enjoy change, that's not quite as true as we'd like to believe. So a lot of the resistance, I believe, to online mediation and negotiation had to do with things other than the human touch. But that's just my suspicion. But still, it was always interesting to encounter it. The way of the world is, though, that whether we like it or not, change happens. And sometimes we change or engage in change processes because we decide to, and sometimes we engage in it because it just happens. I hate to, I don't want to be a downer by putting the enemy on the screen, but what better, what sharper, what more powerful motivator of change have many of us experienced in our lifetimes than COVID-19? And COVID-19, the impact of it, we each have our own story of impact, and we each have our local and our national story of impact. When we look at the professional story of impact, so COVID-19 had an immediate and sharp impact on the professions, including on the mediation profession. And in a moment, all of the resistance that had been piling on over the years to online mediation vanished in a moment. It was really interesting to me watching this happen, sort of as an observer, anthropologist, interested guy in what's going on in the field, to note that nobody, including all of those people who had in the past told me that you can't do this online, sharply explained to me at length, not just that they don't like it, but that it cannot. So I noticed that none of them shut down their businesses and ceased to offer their services because they can't ethically and legitimately offer high quality and effective and constructive mediation processes online. Instead, what they did was, like all of us, they rolled with the situation and they moved online. And most of the mediation field moved to video conferencing, largely Zoom. There are exceptions, of course. And the interesting thing is that what everybody discovered, largely speaking again, is that it works. Now, depending, what does mediation works mean to a mediator? Well, it depends on the mediator. It depends on the mediator's worldview. It depends on the structure or organizational system in which a mediator operates. So, I look forward to the times when we will come together at mediation conferences and be able to debate what a good mediation is. Oh, I miss that. For the time being, though, we're starting to get indicators that mediation, again, at least functionally, works. If you're interested in settlement rates, I haven't heard a single report of anybody telling me that settlement rates are lower than they were in the pre-COVID world, that online settlement rates are lower than offline, than face-to-face settlement rates. Now, here's the thing, by the way, I would hear that before COVID as well. But the difference is that before COVID, it was anecdotal and it was individual mediators sharing this with me, and my own personal experience. In the COVID period, since you have large organizations and systems doing this, so very early on, JAMS just came out and reported, hey, this is working. Settlement rates are at least as high, and that they have been consistently so. Professor Dwight Golan of Suffolk Law School conducted interviews with large groups of mediators, and he heard the same thing. And what he heard is not only that settlement rates are as high, meaning that sort of bottom line effectiveness remains high. It's also that they did better with Zoom than they had expected.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to bump it.
Go.
Can you just let the people in the waiting room come in? The other hosts have issues letting them in.
Oh, so I can
just
allow
let
them
people
to, let me see if I
Yes,
can do it.
please do that. Thank you.
Okay, great. And I will then I will continue to keep an eye out for that.
Okay, then. Thank you, Noam.
And if anyone sees a message saying there are people Then just
Hello.
welcome everybody.
Please, can you mute your mic once you get in? Please mute your mic.
We're so happy you joined
Oh my God. Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. And sorry we made you wait. The usual housekeeping, and sorry to cut you off, Noam, the usual housekeeping rules of online use. Please, if you would mute your mic so that we don't have feedback, and so the host can be heard by everyone. So we'll be grateful if you would mute your mics. We'll wait a minute so that everybody just complies with that. And thank you very much. No, forgive me.
No, I'm so
continue.
happy that everyone was able to join. So here we are, and we know that functionally online mediation, by which I largely mean at this point, video-based mediation, because that's what most people have been doing, particularly the people interviewed, the people at GEMS, and people who, your own experience, I'm sure as well. So we know that it functionally works. And we also know that many people were surprised by how well it worked. And what is, of course, fascinating to me is that as people are discussing how well it worked, they're not only speaking about that the bottom lines were, that people achieved functionally, that they achieved settlement, but rather that when people were given time to explain in writing or in conversations, tell me about why you liked it or how it worked well for you. So what they spoke about then were also things that also sound human touchy, right? And you have this example of this scholar practitioner who shares that they thought that this was impossible, but it apparently is possible. And not only is it possible, but it's impossible in those human aspects that we had all wondered about and been concerned about. So why does online mediation work as well as it does? If it does lack the human touch, which we haven't yet even come close to defining. So one possibility is that actually we're not as dependent on the human touch as we think we are. And I think it's fair for this new development in mediation to cause us to revisit some mediation axioms and practitioner truths that we've all held over the years and really examine them. One, let's set human touch aside, one often used term to describe what happens in a good mediation is the scientific term known as magic. Has anybody used the term magic to describe a mediation? Mediator magic or mediation magic is that sort of sense that somehow the most escalated and acerbic conflict saw a transformative shift through one moment or one action or one mediator move or one party sentence, and all of a sudden everything transformed, and by the end of it everything was different. And many mediators, including highly skilled, highly trained practitioners, professors, will use the term magic to describe that. So it might be that we are less dependent on this magic and on these intangible and ineffable terms such as human touch as we thought we were. It's fair to suggest that. I'm not saying that I agree with that, but it really is, the researcher side in me, as opposed to the mediation magician side in me, has to offer it as a hypothesis. Another reasonable hypothesis is that we're simply better with technology in general, and our fears of losing the human touch are rooted in a period where we were less skilled with technology. But by now, we've just gotten better at doing this. We've gotten better at bringing ourselves to this situation and at eliciting others' humanity or human touchiness across the internet waves. And finally, it might be that technology has also advanced to the stage where actually technology is better at supporting human touch. Even if we haven't gotten better, technology has gotten better for supporting this. It might be that all of these are true to one extent or another. So the human touch is obviously, when you think about it, the human touch itself is in flux. So I'm just fascinated to watch mediation processes and to listen to mediators talk about this now. And since I've been listening and talking to them for years, I tried to put what I know and what I've heard together in an article on the topic, or a book chapter. This book chapter appears in the second edition of ODR Theory and Practice, edited by Ethan Katch, Dan Rainey, and Muhammad Abdul Wahab. And it's it updates a 2012 book. It came out last year, so really just in time when we really needed it. There was this new resource. And I wrote this chapter for it, and I tried to capture these things. So as I said, we might engage in conversation much earlier, and I might not reach everything. And at any rate, I'm going to cut myself off at some point. If anybody's interested in more, just Google the text you see up there, and you'll find the article. And I think that the time is now to talk about these things. This is a magical time to talk about these things, because moments of change, moments of shifts, periods of flux are really fascinating in order to capture the shift between what we were and how we were, and what we are and how we will do things. So we're just now starting to come to terms with these changes, to consider how to work best with them, and to consider which of them we want to preserve in the future. These are all ongoing, both conversations and debates. And I think it's really fascinating to sit down and listen as you engage in these debates. And I'm sure that every one of you certainly in your professional lives will be a part of and a witness to many discussions about the new normal, right? Will we go back to X? Will we go back to Y? How will we do Z in the future? And to listen in these conversations to human touch elements that you hear in them, and notice your own changes and others' changes with regards to those human touch elements. And now we'll delve into what exactly we mean by those human touch elements. And as I'm doing so, I've admitted a few more people into the room, and I'll welcome you, and I'll ask, I'm not going to ask anybody to mute themselves until I've introduced myself and say, hi, I'm Noam Ebner. I'm so happy you joined us. Could you mute yourself? Thanks. And of course, as I invited at the very beginning, if you'd like to jump in with a comment, question, or suggestion as we go along, feel very free to do so. So here we are. And I'm going to utilize, many people used to tell me, you can't bring the human touch online. You can't do it. You can't connect online. And I'm going to invite us to use this period, which sadly shows little sign of disappearing soon. We've been in it for a long time. Many of us have been deeply reflective and have learned things about ourselves and our practice. Some of us have been shallowly reflective, and I think that that's just fine. And I think that this is a great period to stop asking ourselves, to stop telling ourselves things like, you can't do this, to leave the whole can or can't framing aside or behind, and instead to start asking ourselves, how can we do this best? Not can we do this, but how can we do this best? Because we're going to need to do this best. COVID didn't ask us whether we wanted to move online. Many of our employers in the future won't ask us about our preferred mode of work. Our clients will have preferences, and we will want to accommodate those preferences in different ways, as mediators always have wanted to. There are other reasons we might consider staying online for different reasons, process reasons, family reasons, environmental reasons. There are a host of reasons to consider that. So if we're going to stay here, even partially, we need to do better. And particularly, we need to do better and can do better at the human touch. So I noted just last week, I saw an article, or more to the point, about a month ago, Mark Zuckerberg introduced his notion of the metaverse. how the new internet is going to be a shift from the two-dimensional human looking at text and video that we see now. And it's going to shift to an immersive 3D virtual reality, Ready Player One type experience for and you know what I noticed? I noticed that nobody raised their voice in order to say, but Mark, you can't do that. You can't bring the human touch online. You're talking about how we're going to share family dinners with our family and spend time with our loved ones, and and be able to have long distance relationships for real, which is part of his introduction. Nobody said, but Mark, you can't do that. You can't do that. That needs the human touch, and you can't do that online. So one aspect of that was wondering why people say no to me, but they don't say no to Mark Zuckerberg. And I'm going to need to think about that. But beyond that, I also noticed that to the extent that anybody commented on it, this went around the waves. It was printed in many publications. Just the framing. The framing isn't the metaverse will fail because it doesn't have the human touch, but it will be, as we design the metaverse, we need to design it with a very human touch. And I'm going to offer us to adopt that regarding mediation as well. So what do we mean by human touch? I ask people, what do you mean by human touch? And I've collected all sorts of terms that they've used. This is not a scientific definition of the human touch. I'm usually a definer in things. I'm usually at the beginning of any paper or chapter, I seek to provide a definition of just what it is we're going to talk about. And in this chapter, I did not, because we're talking about something. That is, by its nature, vague, ineffable. It means different things to different people. But these are the types of things that people expressed when they said human touch, and I asked them, well, could you break that down? Could you share that with me? So as you're looking at that list, and some of this will make sense to you, some of this will be more associative than others, some of this will be directly spot on, I will read a question that we've seen in the chat. Are we totally correct to say that human touch is lost? Mediators and other professionals have changed and adapted to the new normal. Are we still in touch with ourselves, and we still see our faces and relate on online platforms? And I think that's absolutely correct. And I think that if anything, so the silver lining of COVID, I know it's hard to even consider silver linings of COVID, but one silver lining is that we have made, as I showed, after 25 years of resistance to different forms of online engagement around conflict, we have blazed past through that in 2 weeks. And then in 2 years, how far have we come in doing this? And the reason that I'm still talking about the past and the near past and the present past, sort of, is just because we are still in a change period. And you don't just jump from a past to a future without going through a change period. And being reflective in the change period that we are right now is, I think, of utmost importance. Another reason that it's important is, I think, something I've found immensely valuable for myself as a practitioner, for myself as a teacher, is that as I reflect on my online practice of mediation, of negotiation, of teaching, and I wonder whether this is working, that is working, this needs changing, that needs adapting, it makes me think about those basic things with regards to my face-to-face negotiation in the first place. So I've already hinted that we might learn things, that we might change our practice in the future. I think that we'll learn new things about the human touch, specifically our topic of the day, by considering it in the context of online, that we will then bring back into the room. These notions of magic, human touch, warmth, they've been so vague and undefined over the years. If we think about how to do them online and we break it down and we are more systematic about it, well, then when we come back into the room, we'll do the same thing in the room. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really, I'm really looking forward to getting back in a room myself. I myself live in Florida in the United States right now, which is one of the places where I am least eager to get back into a room. You can tell that by the length of my hair. But someday I hope to get back into a room and find how all these insights will improve.
I have a question, Noam.
Yeah, to me.
What percentage do you think will get back into the room? Because if I look at the other side of practice, that we've already seen some disputes that will never come back into the room. Disputes between 1.1 million and 5 million will probably never come back to the room and will be documents only, it will be online, because it's just cheaper and far more effective. And we're seeing even bigger disputes move out and go onto the space. So if we use that sort of, I know the data for mediation is completely different, but if you could just sort of pluck it out of a hat, so to speak, what percentage do you think will come back into the room?
Let me make a forecast that is based not on not on statistics and anticipation of statistics, but it's more sort of from my bird's eye view of these 25 years, is that all projections about online mediation have so far been wrong. Okay, for example, at its beginning, many people thought this will be a great idea. People will flock to it. It makes perfect sense. And that was not true. A second thing was that people will want to resolve disputes between people at a distance. And, it'll make sense. It'll cut out the travel costs and the travel bother and jurisdictional issues. But people who are reasonably close to one another will prefer to work things out in the room. And that had little to do with the development, in practice, with the development of online mediation. You could have two workers in the same organization who worked in a joint cubicle who still prefer to work it out online, and people on different companies prefer to film. Finally, just a note, another thing is that people assume that the disputes that will be resolved online are those that required perhaps less of the human touch, in the sense that they require less intimacy, connection, closeness, but rather they are, the disputes that will be settled online will be the financial, the cold calculated conversations, and right from the start, the largest group of disputants wanting to conduct, then I'm talking in the early 2000s, wanting volunteering to conduct their mediations online, were divorcing. The most intimate, the most relational disputes actually. So I say that as a cautionary note. Careful of what you expect. And I'll add on a second thing. And that second thing is that, so I noticed that you set your expectations by means of case value. And that's exactly the type of thing, just as I said, type of dispute, distance, and all of those factors that people have thought, well, that'll definitely. So I'm going to suggest the same about case value. And while we think that it might be so, let's wait for a while and see. My answer is, I can't forecast exactly which or how many, but here's what I will forecast: a lot. many cases, not necessarily case types, but if before X cases were done and they were all done in the room, now whatever it is, whether it's 20% or 80%, a large number of them are going to happen. And I think the important thing is, to those of you who are in this room as mediators, and I realize that you can be in the room with other hats on. Some might be judges, some might be community organizers, some might be lawyers, and be wearing that hat at this moment. When we're wearing the mediator hat, many of us don't ask sort of what's best economically, objectively, or what's best for us, but rather what's best for the process and the parties. And if you'd apply that question to each and every mediation, rather than sort of making broad assumptions about whether case value, case type, distance, and really just see this as reason for a conversation with parties, then we will, as a profession, we will have evolved in a way that is true to our nature. I'm not sure that it's entirely going to go that way. Practicalities will impose. But
go on, please.
No, but I'm going to invite us all, as practicalities start to pile up and people start telling us why, financially speaking, this is the way we need to do it. As mediators, I'm going to remind us that we have another frame of assessing these types of things or deciding these types of things.
Excellent segue. Excellent segue into something I wanted to point out in the comments, saying how will we deal with empathy and how do we simulate this on the online? If I'm thinking, oh, more of it will go online, how do we simulate empathy? I believe this came from Ms. Morenica Ojo, and Mr. Adenuga has commented on it. It was in the chat, and I thought I'd bring it to your attention.
Excellent, thank you. So what we'll do now is, instead of relating to my prepared talk, let me jump ahead and talk about that. Empathy is one of the topics that is in this chapter. I'm so happy you raised it, and one reason that I'm happy you raised it is because empathy is precisely one of those things that, when discussing mediation in the before, we would talk about it. Let's say in mediation training, we would talk about it, but we wouldn't teach it deeply. We'd say, yeah, empathy is important. And then when someone displayed empathy or used empathy well in a simulation, we'd point at it, or the party would say, well, I really felt empathy from the part of the mediator. And we point at that and say, yep, be like that, do that. It's one of these things that I think, at least at the educational level, we don't necessarily pick apart enough. And that serves as a great example for why, when we're going online and we know that empathy is challenged online, then we need to pick apart empathy, learn exactly what it is, and then reconstruct empathy in order to do it successfully online. If we can figure out how to do that, then by the time we go back into the room, we will be more empathically intelligent. And we're going to, pardon me, do empathy better, because we will have been more mindful and intentional about it online. So empathy is, it's a word that covers many, many things, but two of its core aspects are two of the key things that we focus on in mediation. One is what's known as walking a mile in another's shoes, right? Helping parties see the other party's perspective with regards to their, just how they see things, how they see the situation. Why are they fighting with me? Are they fighting with me because they're bad people, or does it make sense to them in some way? Why do they think they deserve X? Why are they asking me why? So that is the sort of the cognitive part of empathy. How does my counterpart see things? And as mediators, we help parties see that without imposing it on them by saying, and now you have to, or now you have to accept them, now you have to do anything. No, but helping them to understand cognitively how their counterpart sees things. A second part of empathy is the emotional part of empathy. And that relates to the question of what is my counterpart feeling? Or as a mediator, what are parties feeling? That's party mediator empathy. And, of course, parties might also feel that kind of empathy towards one another. In other words, accurately identifying parties' emotional status as opposed to my own emotional status. Mediators, we like to, there's something in the nature of the professionalized process that means that we're not a part of this, right? It's not about us. We're not emotional. Parties are emotional. But of course, we have emotions in the room. We can be nervous or excited or scared or, or more fleeting feelings like hungry or annoyed or all sorts of things. And we need to separate that from parties. So being able to accurately identify parties. And of course, we know that in mediation, this is such a human touch element that everything positive in mediation has been found to be dependent on. The research on this is wide and lots. Okay, online, here's the thing. We're challenged. Our challenge is to empathy formation. We're challenged to how we do we even recognize in parties what they're going through, both emotionally and prospectively. Are we accurate in understanding them? Do we get their emotional situation, not only in the broad sense of, something negative is going on that side. Can we pinpoint it down to anger, grief, I don't know, vengeance, like whatever the emotion is? We're challenged in the way we can express empathy. Just as a very simple thing, one of the most human touch ways, methods of empathic expression might be to lay a hand on someone else's hand for a moment. And that's just an easy example of the things we're denied. But there are many others. And there are also limitations to whether, when we express empathy towards a party, whether it actually reaches them. In other words, empathy is a two-way street. I need to recognize what they're going through and also make sure that I recognize it and that they know that I recognize it. And online communication challenges that all the way through. What can we do about it? Just to show that there's a practical aspect to all this when we start working with the human touch in an intentional manner. And the book chapter discusses at length how to work with empathy online. So simulating it is one part of it. I mean, the best way, and I've always felt this both as a practitioner and also as a teacher, you know what the best way to work well with empathy is? Just, be empathic. Work, be it. Empathy, we can describe it as a tool, but it's also a mode of being. It's a mode of openness to our parties. It's a mode of, what are we focused on? Are we focused on the numbers they are throwing at us, or are we also focused on the underlying distress in their tone of voice? It's just a matter of what are we looking for. And in that sense, online empathy is first and foremost empathy. So I'm not going to describe at length how to simulate empathy online, but I can describe how to generate it and replicate it and bring it to life online. There is one simulated element, and that is that one conveyor of empathy is eye contact. And eye contact is one of the prime missing links in even the best video conferencing. This is artificial. There is no real moment in which eye contact manifests in video conferencing. What we can do, however, is we can simulate eye contact. In other words, if we're talking and I lean forward and I gaze into the camera, then I have simulated eye contact, and I've given my counterpart the artificial sense that I've looked into their eyes. And research shows that this is enough. In other words, what is enough on the other person's side to feel the experience of empathy is the sense that the other person has empathized, and that artificial sense of eye contact is actually enough. So be mindful of this. Most of the time, our cameras are not aimed directly with our screens. So it's a really good practice as a mediator to be looking at the camera. And in just 1 second, but before that, one last comment on this, which is it's very helpful to use the setting, whether it's on Zoom or on other platforms, that eliminates our own self-view. In other words, the screen that shows us, if you can find a way to take that off the screen, do so. And that will free you to look at the camera a lot more than you ordinarily do. Because here's the thing, when we're on screen, we look at ourselves. People by nature, we are self-focused. And this is one of the strangest things about video conferencing communication that is totally different from face-to-face communication, is that we are constantly looking at ourselves as we speak. What a different world. If you can eliminate yourself, it will free you from that and will allow you to be a lot more other focused, which will, will add a lot more empathy into the virtual room. Tunde, go ahead.
Thank you very much. That's a fantastic tip to eliminate oneself. But I was going to sort of push you to tell us about what it is that we should expect in the future. Do you think technology will change the empathy dynamics when we have holographic images of projections and where you can see that person and their body language and all that, and in a sense they can almost, you can see their movements and the micro expressions in the room as holographic technology gets better and we start using this? We sort of seen a sort of it while I was working in France and that technology being tested. But do you think that will change the empathy dynamics? Thank you.
Thank you, and absolutely, absolutely. We are just at the start of all this. And that is why being reflective when we're making what seems to us to be a huge jump, but is really only a small and gradual jump into video conferencing. And some of us have also gone through email or will go through email. That is why being reflective and thoughtful as we go along is so important, because it'll help us not only to evolve now, but to be evolvable, more evolvable in the future. So in the future, I mean, the easiest technology to anticipate is that type of holographic video that some of us have seen glimpses of. I'm editing a book now on Star Wars and conflict resolution. So those who have seen the movies remember from the very start of it with Princess Leia saying, "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope," in a hologram. And if you can bring yourself back into that movie, ask yourself, was she able to elicit empathy via that holographic message? And the answer is absolutely. You wanted to help her. And Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi also wanted to help her. So it had something to it. I'll mention the work by Susan Naus Exon at Laverne School of Law in California. She's done some really pioneering work on that technology, on more immersive technology than video conferencing. And she's written a couple of articles on it. A couple of them, I think, that focused on the notion of trust, which is another one of those human touch elements that I also expand on in this book chapter. And she looks at it in the more immersive context, one of which is the hologram type form of visual conferencing. I think, though, that we're just at the beginning, and of course, as things increase. But let's put it this way: right now, when we moved to email, we started being concerned. Oh, but what about body language? What about voice? What about these cues that now that we don't know what tone the other person is speaking to us in? And then we came back to video, and all of a sudden we have that back. So now many people say, well, video conferencing, well, it's almost as good, in that sense, it's almost as good as a face-to-face meeting. But what about other sensory sources of input? Has anybody ever considered the impact of smell on mediation? And the truth is that not so far as I know, at least not in the academic literature, and it's also not usually a topic of conversations amongst mediators. We've spoken about things like being hungry or eating, or what food makes for a good mediation. So we have spoken a little bit about taste, but we have other senses that we haven't even yet begun to sort of question their impact on the mediation setting. As technology allows us to interact in increasingly immersive ways, there will be more immersive forms of communication. For example, scientists, computer engineers are now working on how to convey smell via the internet. They've been working for years on how to embed it in sort of in movie theaters, so that when you're in a forest scene, you'd smell the forest. When you're in an ocean scene, you'll smell the salt. How can you do that over the internet? Well, I don't know the answer, but people are very motivated to find those answers, because it'll be whatever it is, it'll be a multi-billion-dollar business, and it will impact mediation as well. We don't even know how it will impact mediation. Specifically, empathy is a good place to look. Folks, I'm gonna just continue. If anybody has comments or questions, just I promise to cut myself off at a certain point, and we've reached that point. So I'm officially unsharing, if I can.
You skipped some bits. You skipped some bits before we move to empathy. So if you want to go back and take those, because I realized I sort of stopped your flow and sort of abrogated your presentation. So if you want to take us back through that.
I appreciate that, Tunde, but there's really no concern about that. Again, as I said, I could talk about this at great length and converse about this at great length. So happy to do that. But if anybody has comments, yep. Let's see what happens if I be quiet.
Can I just jump in at this point?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We've enjoyed this so much, and I'm going to ask you that you would come back on another of our monthly sessions, and I'm sure you would do that, because I see you have so much in this presentation, and we've just been able to cover just a few. I saw that while today I asked you about the empathy question, because I know there are other issues to the human touch that you would want to talk about. We've talked about trust very briefly. Maybe it's something that we might just be able to spend an hour chatting about. So if you would agree to come back at some point later in the year, that would be great.
You flatter me, Monica. Of course, I'd love to.
Somebody has also asked about somebody's also asked about the slides, whether you could possibly make it available to us, so we could send.
The recording will be available. Recording will be available.
Absolutely. Send me an email afterwards. I'll be happy to share them for you to send to anybody who wants it.
Superb. So this is the discussion point. Yeah, this is the discussion point. Please, if you have any opinions or something you want to share with us, this is what we call open mic session. No karaoke, yeah, but it's an open mic session. Please, this is the time.
I see in the chat the comment on pioneering work in this field is cutting edge at the Holocaust Memorial Museum in DC. And I assume that was speaking about new technology and immersion. And I look forward to getting there. I was able to make it to DC but everything was closed for COVID, and I wasn't able to get into the museum. Now I realized yet another thing that I've lost. Folks, please, this is your community and your conversation. Would anyone want to share either a question or a story in which any of this played out or was important?
Well, I would just want to say, for me, I think trust in the human touch domain, trust is probably, I would say more important than empathy, but trust is a big issue, because as mediators, we say we want to connect with the party. Because once we connect, then we gain their trust, and they're able to open up to us. So that's why I thought, when I saw trust along the way while you were, I thought trust would be something that will be very important for us to discuss. How do we then build that trust online? Sometimes when we're face to face, we think it's our body language, it's being able to match the parties, it's being able to see them, that will endanger or improve that trust building process. But online, it would be nice to talk about how would we do that? What can we do? Yes, you've given us a clue. don't look at yourself, because you also want to be able to match the parties and all of that. So that's something I think.
Let's put a pin in that, and let me suggest this. If you want to invite me back to talk about trust, and I'll be happy to do so. And I think that then we could take a deeper look at trust before jumping into trust online, because exactly as you just flowed, Monica, exactly that. We said, sort of, how do you do it online? I sort of know how you do it in the room. It's sort of body language and a sense. But if, but my questionnaire was, how do you build trust in a room? If you had to break it down into how you intentionally go about doing it, you'd find that you'd need, to gather your thoughts and think about it, and find that a great deal of it comes intuitively. And that if you start thinking about it, there are some things you do more of and some things you do less of. And it's exactly that sort of thing that thinking about how to do it online is shedding light on how little we think about how to do it in the room. And you're right, trust is a biggie, maybe even the biggie in mediation. There are a couple of articles in Negotiation Journal by Stephen Goldberg and some colleagues from around 12, 15 years ago that explore the topic of what is the domain, what is the most important domain of mediator skills, or what is the source of a mediator's ability to work with parties. And they found that both mediators and parties thought that trust was the most important. So I absolutely agree. That's a biggie, and deserves your comment, my comment, and any other time you want to dedicate to it.
Okay. Tunde will just round up.
All right.
So Ademi has commented in the chat. I've had a few passionate and emotion-led mediations online, and the human touch was perfect despite the virtual environment. Once you have the rapport and the technology is stable, you are good to go. And I know that, or I know that it can be that way. I don't want to go so far as to say it's always that way.
Mr. Joan will speak, and then Onibokun will also like to say a few words. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Today, I think we all have our different strategies, and in getting to direct the mindset of parties in a way that is conducive for us to resolve the disputes between them. And a lot of us do it in our opening statements. And one of the tricks I believe in is, first of all, to make sure that you separate the dispute from the people, and so that the people are not looking at each other through their dispute. They're looking at human beings and the dispute separately. And that way it's easier to work on trust and empathy. For instance, I usually try to remind them that it's structured negotiation, and you give to take. And when you want to take, you should try and think about what the other party is needing to part with to make this good for you. But I think in all of that, in a virtual environment, most of us know that there's this barrier. I'm in my room. I mean, you wouldn't know if I'm wearing pajamas shorts now. You wouldn't know anything. So because I feel that, because I know that, I think that's where I still reserve some things for myself, which I wouldn't have been able to reserve if I was right in front of you. So I think that's where it is. So that psychological barrier is what we need to work on. And if we can tone it down, we're good to go. Along the line, people will forget that they're actually in front of cameras. We've seen reality shows that people get into all sorts, and it's so obvious that maybe by the first, second, or third day, they've forgotten that there are cameras staring at them. Thank you. So,
What a great point.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll take one more. I think there was one more question very quickly, and then we'll round up because we're definitely ahead of time. Ms. Oniboku, you had a question real quick?
Yes, it's actually a comment, and Tunde, the immediate past speaker, has in a way spoken my mind. Issues of empathy and trust. I don't believe that there are much of problems, because we go into these negotiations voluntarily, and the first thing is to look at how we introduce ourselves and look at the issues. And we should not lose sight of the fact that we are pushed or drawn into online platforms, technologies, etc., because of the situation we find ourselves with COVID. You know, with the reality of it is that when you know that you have seen people go to the beyond, left, right, and center, you know, naturally and psychologically, one is prepared. One is prepared for mediation. Thank you, my comment. Thank you for organizing.
Thank you, everybody. Noam?
So nice.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Oniboku. Noam, excellent. And I will personally hold you back. I'm already volunteering.
Honorable Justice Oniboku. Honorable Justice Oniboku.
Désolé, madame. C'est désolé. C'est moi. C'est ma apologies, deep apologies. This is what online does to you. You never know who's on the other side. So my lady, forgive me. No, I'm personally volunteering myself forward to take that session on trust beforehand, because I'm quite interested, because this is what we all do for a living, and how we project ourselves into the future matter. We are honored today, all of us. We've learned a new skill from you today, whether you like it or not. Turn off your mic so you don't keep staring at yourself. Human beings, as much as we say it, don't appreciate how selfish we are, but you kind of do with the amount of selfie sticks that are sold around the world these days. Thank you so much for your insight and your knowledge, and we appreciate it. We look forward to hearing you again very soon. I am grateful to everyone that has come to these knowledge sharing sessions. I hope you got something from it today. I certainly did, because I'm a teacher, but more importantly, first of all, I am always a student. With that, we thank you, everyone, and have a lovely evening. Thank you, Noah.
Thank you, Noam.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
bye.